1 minute to vote.
Yeah, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am here with Harry Dixon from the Centre of Ecology and Hydrology in the UK, from Wallingford. And we have an interesting number of participants online for our event today about the hydrological status and outlook system. What is this system? We will have that explained by Harry, and I want to introduce maybe a little bit from the WMO's perspective on why we are engaging in hydrological outlooks and hydrological status things. I have been part of a lot of discussion over these days here in the COP, and it is clear that all the stocktake process that the climate negotiators are trying to build carefully, all the modeling, the predictive capability that we need to predict into the future in terms of water availability or not, all that depends largely on can we build the right models, can we have the right communities to provide this information. And the Hydro SOS is a WMO initiative that is geared to work with our members to provide this capacity, to build this capacity and to have a community that works together on making sure that we can provide the right information for building resilient society and the services and providing the services we need to protect our people from floods, droughts, and to provide them with the water they will need in the future. So that's a little bit the intro from my side. This initiative has been asked for by WMO member states 4 years ago, and we have worked out in a pilot phase how this can work, and the Congress in WMO this year has now decided that we shall implement this system worldwide to really provide the COP, the members, and all the people that are wanting information on hydrology with the information base they need. And I will now hand over the floor to Harry. Harry is a member of WMO's Infrastructure Commission, so he also works with us in a hydrological coordination panel on really making this thing here live, because so far the Hydro SOS is a very good idea. We have some proof that it works. We had some pilot projects, but now we need to implement it. And Harry will say how the SOS is built and how we're going to go about it. Harry.
Thanks very much, Johannes. As Johannes says, my name's Harry Dixon. I work for an organisation called the UK Centre for Ecology and Hydrology. And over the last few years, we've been supporting WMO in the pilot phase of Hydro SOS. And as Johannes mentioned, last month, WMO members approved the end of that pilot phase and moved us into an implementation process for Hydro SOS. So we're at a really pivotal point for the initiative at the moment, and we wanted to say a little bit tonight about what it is and how you can help, how you can get involved in the process. So thank you very much for coming along. Thank you to all of those who've connected online, and we look forward to discussing this with you. If I can get the clicker to move us on. I'm getting thumbs up from the technical team, but no movement. There we go. So we've heard a lot in the lead up to COP and actually over the first few days about the connection between climate and water. And we know that one of the key aims of this COP is to try and advance adaptation. And you all know that water is one of the key ways in which we need to adapt, the way that we manage water across the planet. So I'm not going to spend too much time readdressing that, but I'd like to just give you 3 thoughts. The first is that we hear a lot about changes in floods and droughts, but we shouldn't forget that it's not all about changes in the extremes. Across the world, we're seeing in many river basins changes across the flow regime in the availability of water of adequate quality to be able to deliver on our needs. So we mustn't forget that it's not all about water extremes. The second is that it's not a future problem. This is a problem for now. This map was published a couple of months ago in a WMO State of Climate Services for Water report that came out. And it shows the current water stress hotspots around the world. And 25% of the world's population are currently anticipated to be living within water-stressed basins around the world. And that's going to change, that's going to get worse in the future. But this is a problem for now as much as it is a problem for the future. And the third thought is this isn't just a developing world problem. Around the world, both within these hotspots on this map and more widely, countries are suffering from an availability of water to meet growing demands and growing needs. So the key question really is, well, how do we adapt? How do we adapt our water management practices? How do we adapt our demand to be able to cope with these increased water stresses that we're going to see, we're seeing now and we're going to see into the future? And those adaptation solutions are going to take different forms around the world. Wherever we go, there'll be different adaptation solutions. But what we would argue is that one of the key things that is going to be needed for all adaptation in the water arena is an improvement in the water information that's available, improvement in the baseline information we have about what water is where and how that's likely to change. The problem is that there's currently a significant gap between what we have and what we need in terms of water data and water information services. We hear a lot about countries who are lacking the basic observational infrastructure, but there's also a problem with turning that data into information that can be used to inform decision making. And just to give you just two examples of where we, in a warming world, we need better water information. On the left here, you've got a spray irrigation system. And if we're going to be able to manage irrigated agriculture, particularly in groundwater-dominated catchments, we need information around how our aquifers are responding. We need information around precipitation patterns. We need information around soil moisture. Similarly, on the right, if we're going to effectively manage hydropower, we need not only information around what's in our current storages, but we need to know what the upstream melt patterns are likely to be in glacier-dominated regions, and we need to know what runoff to be expected from those areas. So in a warming world, we need better information, it needs to be reliable information, and it needs to be integrated so that stakeholders know where to go and know what to look for and get the answers they need. In the WMO community, we often talk around this sort of value chain. So moving from observations on the outside there, down on the left, through the generation of information and analysis products into informed decision making, improved water resources management, and ultimately saving lives, reducing losses, improving livelihoods, and enhancing sustainability. It's quite widely recognised, and there's been events over the COP so far, that we need to do more to enhance the basic observational infrastructure that countries have in the water area, to get that baseline monitoring data improved, to make sure that we're capturing better information. And there's lots of innovations out there of how we can do that at the moment. But WMO members have consistently asked for more support in helping to analyse and produce information products off the back of that data so that they can feed them into their stakeholders to inform decision making. So for WMO members, that Hydro Sos, which is shown in the blue circles here at the top of the diagram, it's that missing bit between improving our data and then turning that into information that can be actioned by stakeholders. So what's Hydro Sos going to provide? Well, it's going to focus on three key pieces of information. The first is an overview of the current status of river basins, of groundwater aquifers, of soil moisture, and that'll be at different scales. That might be a basin scale, that might be a national scale, that might be a regional scale, or a global scale. Secondly, an appraisal of where that current status is significantly different from normal. So that might indicate some flood susceptibility or drought conditions that are building up in a particular area. And thirdly, and crucially, an assessment of where this is likely to change over coming weeks or months. So where it might get better, where it might get worse. And the focus really is on that sub-seasonal to seasonal timescale. So Hydro Sos is complementing other WMO initiatives that are aimed more at the short timescale forecasting, flood forecasting systems, drought indicator systems. Hydro Sos sits in that middle ground between the short-term forecasting and long-term climate prediction. But a key thing to remember about Hydro Sos is this is not one big new global modelling system. It's about linking up what we already have around the world and then working together to fill in the blanks and to build more capacity at a local level. So to actually be able to provide improved decision making, we need to link up traditional bottom-up approaches where information is generated at a national level by hydrological services with some of the more recent service development we've seen for global level modelling products. Because at the moment there's a disconnect between those two things, and that's leading to a lack of information and a lack of trust in some of these hydrological information services. So just give you three kind of examples here on the screen of the sorts of things we're talking about at different scales. On the left there's an example of a river flow information system from Argentina, where the different colours of those triangles are indicating current river flow within the different parts of the catchment. In the middle there, at a regional level, this is an example of a system that's set up in the Sava River Basin in the Balkans. So this is a transboundary basin covering 6 countries where they're pooling their information. And this is exactly the kind of thing that we're trying to help build within Hydro Sos. And then on the right-hand side, you have an example of a product that's been brought out by the Swedish Meteorological and Hydrological Institute, a global-scale modelling product that fills in some of those blanks where we don't currently have information from ground truth sources. So what we're trying to do with Hydro Sos is to integrate information between these 3 different scales and then fill in the blanks so that we help to build more capacity where we don't currently have information. In terms of what that means in practice, what is it that WMO is looking to do? What is it that we're looking to support countries around the world in doing? Well, the practical support would come in maybe 4 different ways. Firstly, we'd be looking to help develop and deliver tools and methods to help national hydrological services to be able to analyse the data they have and produce new information products. Secondly, we're looking to develop a community of practice, a support community across hydrological services from around the world, so they can help each other with training, with understanding how to integrate these new large-scale products into their national decision-making and other things. And then the last 2 here, the integration standards and the IT infrastructure, that's about building the stuff we need to be able to pull this stuff together. We're about building stuff at a local level within countries and then trying to integrate it into a patchwork of different services. So that's the kind of practical support that we're looking to build. Hydro Sos is very much something that's trying to be built by and for national meteorological and hydrological services. We've got a consortium of around 20 countries on board already, and we very much hope that that will ramp up over the next year as we move into an implementation phase. So it's about helping those national hydrological and meteorological services provide better information for their stakeholders. And if you think about who those stakeholders might be and how they might benefit, well, primarily it's about allowing those services to be able to deliver for their national stakeholders. So for the water resources departments, for the national hydropower organisations, for the national disaster management organisations, making sure that they can provide the information needed for those national agencies to be able to take decisions. But more than that, if we can help bring things together across transboundary basins, it will help basin organisations be able to have a baseline of consistent information that can help prevent conflict and bring people together in transboundary basins. And thirdly, if we can bring things together at a larger level, at a regional level, at a global level, we really foresee that Hydro Sos will be a key tool to help the aid and the development sector, UN agencies and others be able to understand what the current state of hydrology is around the world, and they'll be able to inform their preparedness and response to extreme events in particular. So viewed through a climate lens, Hydro Sos is really about supporting adaptation. As I said at the beginning, we're seeing increased water stress around the world, and it's about helping national services be able to develop the information to be able to inform their adaptation planning and support the implementation of that. I mentioned earlier about hydropower and about the agricultural sector, but there's lots of other sectors where increasing the information available to them will really be able to provide enhanced decision making. So you can think about it from an industry perspective, whereby if we have enhanced information around water availability over the coming weeks and months, that might be able to help them assess risk from where abstractions from manufacturing might be at risk over the near to medium term. But it's not all about climate action, really. Hydro Sos will support other global agendas as well. So quite crucially, it's providing the baseline hydrological data, the statistics, the information that's needed to help implement SDG 6 and also the other water-related actions under other SDGs. That fostering of international and regional cooperation, particularly in transboundary basins that I mentioned earlier, helps advance some of the agendas in those basins and bring services together across boundaries. And then, of course, having said at the beginning, it's not all about the extremes. Hydro Sos will provide indications of where drought conditions are developing or where susceptibility to floods is particularly acute. So it will help us advance the information that we have available and supporting actions towards the Sendai framework. So before I finish, just to say, well, how can you help? As Johannes mentioned at the beginning, we're at a point now where we're moving from a pilot phase of Hydro Sos into implementation. This has always been designed as a program which is meant to be inclusive. We want to bring in people from national services, we want to bring in the research sector, we want to bring in the private sector, we want to bring in transboundary basin authorities and others. So as we move into this implementation phase, we're really keen to establish new partnerships. We're keen to talk to development financiers, we're keen to talk to technical agencies who might be able to help support national Met and hydro services in the development of these type of information systems. We're keen to talk to regional bodies who would like to develop this kind of capability across their areas of interest. And we're also keen to talk to people who might like to support us in setting up the global infrastructure, the global technical support that's going to be needed to implement Hydro Sos over the next few years. So I hope that's given a flavour of what Hydro Sos is all about. What we're going to do now is we're going to move into a panel session, which is going to be moderated by my colleague, Professor Alan Jenkins at the UK Centre for Ecology and Hydrology, who's going to join us online. And we have a number of panel members from around the world who are going to connect, and Alan will introduce those as he passes over to them. So I'm hoping we can seamlessly transfer down to Oxfordshire in southern England and let Alan take over. Alan, can you hear us? And more importantly, can we hear you?
I can hear you, yes indeed, Harry, and that was an excellent presentation. Thank you very much. I can even see myself on the screen, so I guess people there can also see me. Of course, it's not about seeing me, because I'm not the important person here. The most important people are the panelists. And in just a moment, we'll get the panel session started. We are hoping that this will only last 20 minutes or so, and then there will be an opportunity for questions, both for people there, who are there in person, and for people who are online. So firstly, with apologies from myself for not being with you in person in Glasgow, but it is my pleasure to be here online and to join this event. I also have had some dealings with WMO for a number of years and have been actively involved in the demonstration project around Hydro Sos. But look, to get into the discussion, Harry gave us a few ideas about the benefits of Hydro SOS, but that was really from the point of view of his point of view from the UK. What I'd like to do is to ask a couple of the panelists if they could give a bit of their local flavour on what the country and regional benefits of Hydro SOS might be. And I'd like to first of all ask Dr. Ashish Mitra, who is the head of the National Centre for Medium Range Weather Forecasting in India as part of the Ministry of Earth Sciences. Ashish, could you put a little colour, a local regional colour on what you think the benefits of Hydro SOS might bring?
Yeah, thanks, Alan. We are in a very interesting phase of this Hydro SOS, going from pilot to implementation phase. So there are a lot of benefits to South Asia or India, you can say, because it is influenced by a big climate system. Part of the Earth climate system is the monsoon. And the population of South Asia, or you can say Southeast Asia, or the whole of Asia is covered by monsoon. So it's very interesting that when we develop capability of the numerical models to be able to simulate and predict the water availability in coming weeks and months. So it's very crucial to test those things in the monsoon domain. As you know, the South Asian monsoon has a huge variability, and agriculture and water availability is the key for the huge population in the Asia. So we know in the last decade, models have improved, and we are getting good skillful forecast in weeks. And very recently, very high resolution models, coupled models are producing multi-week forecast going up to 2 to 3 weeks. Even these seasonal forecasts are very skillful. So this is the time we start linking the quantitative precipitation forecast to the hydrological model, and then do this water availability or various applications of water, say in agriculture or water resources. And another aspect is in South Asia, you have these transboundary river systems like Ganges, Brahmaputra and Meghna. And they're all influenced by glaciers and snow melt, and they're transboundary in nature. So the key is to be able to monitor them through satellites and numerical models. So there is a lot of scope to now use these monitoring tools and go for the hydrological assessment and monitoring. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ashish. You certainly added some excellent flavor to the use and the benefits of Hydro SOS. I'd like to ask for some comments actually from another part of the world by introducing Arsene Mukubwa, who works for the Lake Victoria Basin Commission in Kenya. Arsene, maybe you could offer us a few comments on the likely benefits of Hydro SOS in your region.
Yeah, thank you very much. Of course, we expect quite a number of benefits. One, of course, is given the mandate that the River Basin Commission that I work with has been vested on by the partner states to sustainably monitor and inform the countries on different issues, pertaining to water quality, among other issues. You realize that the most critical issue, one, of course, is to get data, as it has been also mentioned in the presentation. Get data, a bottom-up approach from the countries. It is one. But also, even once you have them, at a regional level, then you also require to have, in case you have the capacity to develop tools or analytical platforms that can allow you to generate information that you can use to inform decisions that are to be taken, of course, at the regional level. So the Hydro SOS, of course, is one of the platforms we are looking at, of course, in terms of feeding, like the Commission, with information that we can't maybe get from countries or because they are scarce, but also generating information that can actually use that our decision makers can use to take decisions that are pertaining, of course, several issues in the Lake Basin. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Arsene. Fantastically interesting. Two different regions of the globe, two quite different benefits, or a number of different benefits that we can see from implementing Hydro SOS. Not wishing to prolong and take this to every region of the globe, I would, however, like to ask one other panelist to say a few words, and that's Jose Alberto Tunigamora. Jose Alberto is the WMO Regional Advisor for South America. Jose Alberto, what about South America? Would you see something different in terms of country and regional benefits of this system?
Sorry, I was muted. It happens. Thank you very much, Alan, and thank you for allowing me to participate and express the views from this region. Well, our region has significant differences. You know, US, Canada, Mexico on one side, and then Central America, and then the islands in the Caribbean. So there is a variety of phenomena going there and running there. And the most important thing is that the prediction itself and how to cope with different phenomena that are in place already, El Niño, La Niña. And for instance, in Central America, where I come from, the region is subject to dry and wet periods, whose intensity is strictly linked to El Niño and La Niña. And there is a strong need for those predictions in order to estimate the runoff and how this is used for planning of the water use. We have a commitment, let's say, as a country, for instance, also, we have a commitment in reaching the highest level in energy production based on renewables. So those predictions are really playing a very important part on this scope that our country has. But moreover, we have what we call the dry corridor in Central America. And this is typical or very common from this climate variation we have. So the benefits are very clear for us, let's say, in terms of agriculture, energy, and also water supply for our population. We don't have still on board, we are not on board on this Hydro SOS, but we already have a hydrological forum that looks for this. So for the moment, this is just some hints of what we are expecting and what we are already doing for this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jose Alberto, and the three of you, thank you for adding that color to the benefits of Hydro SOS and for pointing to those multitude of benefits in different regions, but probably also being a little frightening in terms of the implementation, because we've got so many things to take into account as we roll this system out into the different parts, different countries and different regions of the world. I'd like to move on and think about other benefits of Hydro SOS, and Harry Dixon earlier pointed to some sectors of the economy that might benefit from Hydro SOS. So it's quite clear that the people will benefit. But what about the economy? What about the economic side of things? Let me ask that question of Dr. Narendra Tuteja, who is the Regional Supply and Flood Modelling Manager for Water New South Wales down in Australia. Narendra, what do you think in terms of sectors of the economy that would win from implementation of Hydro SOS?
Thank you, Alan and Harry, for the presentation. From the perspectives in Australia, as an example, where the water market mechanisms are very proactive, it has a direct implications on almost all sectors of the Australian economy. The major sectors, and no matter which part of the world we are in, let's say emergency management, agriculture, livestock, environment, energy, mining, town water supply, transport, navigation, defense, every sector of the economy typically depends upon water one way or the other. Now, in Australia, where the market mechanisms are very active, the three key drivers really are weather and climate that Harry talked about, the commodity prices, and water policy. All of these three things are really relevant for tapping into the information that Hydro Sos is aiming to provide. In Australia, the total water that's available for use is capped. And water prices then vary with supply and demand pressure. The supply goes up, the prices go down, and vice versa. So an accounting system that is leveraging the data that Hydro Sos is aiming to develop. Really, if you take over the water accounting system, typically would have how much water we have in store, what do we expect to come out into our storages in the weeks and days and seasons and ahead, how much of water the economy has already committed, and what are the overheads or the losses in the system or the lack of efficiency, etc. So to give you a flavor of the prices, there are two types of trade in Australia, the allocation trade and the entitlement trade. In the allocations, we can temporarily give water, our rights of water to somebody else at a market price. And I can do that temporarily, which is an allocation trade, or we can also do it in a permanent basis. And that has been enabled simply by a major policy reform where title to land and title to water was separated, which means we can sell the water rights temporarily or permanently. And these prices, if I sell the water permanently, the price can be anywhere between $1,000 per 1,000 cubic meters of water to $4,500 per 1,000 cubic meters of water. And similarly, the allocation rates can vary somewhere between $0 to $1,300 per 1,000 cubic meter. When you add up together last financial year, that trade amounted to something like $7 billion. So you can say every part, every sector actually starts competing for water, and the use of water through this mechanism move from low value water use to high value water use. And how do we value water? Societies will value water in different ways, and therefore the policies will actually move the pricing mechanism in that way. So I guess that gives you a little bit of an idea from an Australian perspective, how much each sector actually is valuing water and how the water use moves by these market mechanisms from low productive use of water to high productive use of water. So finally, I guess to sum up, all river operations that we do here in Water New South Wales, all water allocations that we do, all water security planning that we do, largely rests on data, information, and insights, which is precisely what Hydro Sos is aiming to provide. So that's, I guess, our flavor from your side, our side of things. And back to you, Alan. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Narendra. That was a fantastic answer, and it gives us real insight into the way in the essential need for the data, for the insight. A super answer. Look, I want to move us on to think a bit more about the future, and to think a little bit about Hydro Sos might be able to help us in assessing future water demands. because of course we've said that Hydro Sos is a status and outlook system. So I want to hand over and ask that question to Dr. Michela Suriano, who's a researcher in water resources at the National Water Institute in Argentina. And she's also an assistant professor at the Buenos Aires University. So Michela, how might we use Hydro Sos to tell us something about future water demands?
Hi, Alan, thank you. Hi, everyone, and thank you for the invitation. I'm glad to be here. Well, I think that we can discuss different points regarding this question. We know that climate change produces droughts and water stress in many parts of the world. As an example, here in Argentina, we are experimenting a decrease in the snow cover in the Andes mountain for the last years, the last decade. So this situation gives us a result, a reduction in the discharge of the rivers, and many sectors, including agriculture, energy production, water supply, and several ecosystems have been suffering for this reason. So I think that when we talk about water sector, particularly about water demands, it is necessary to take into account the interconnection between water, energy, and food sector, and also, of course, the influences of increasing population and climate change. In my opinion, Hydro Sos has the potential to give us a solution in that way. Hydro Sos provides a platform for assessing the current hydrological status and outlooks. The focus is on the availability of water resources across the world. And one of the main objectives is to provide a framework for national hydrological services to integrate their products with other service providers. But it's not only about sharing data, like Harry said at the beginning. It's about how the data is displayed in a clear way to help to understand the situation and make better decisions. Another strength of Hydro Sos is the possibility of giving guidelines and solutions where no national system is available or needs improvement. So I think that the key is to have an integrated platform with the different national hydrological services are in. So maybe as an idea, a next step could be adding information about other variables related to water demands, as our irrigation or water supply, for example, and also involve other stakeholders. I think that through cooperation, the capabilities will be improved and the results that Hydro Sos provides will be much more accurate to take better decisions in management of water resources. Thank you.
Perfect, Michela. Thank you very much. And let me ask for a meteorologist's answer to this question about how Hydro Sos can help assess future water demands. Of course, a lot of it's about how we deal with the meteorology. So Ashish, maybe you could give us some comments from that point of view.
Yeah, what Narendra described in Australia, they have a very good water accounting kind of thing. So in a country like India, or let's say in South Asia, now if we link the prediction models with the hydrological models, then we can estimate. We know the population and water consumption and different cropping pattern in agriculture. Different crops consume different type of water. And this numerical simulation model for the weather and climate, and combined with the hydrological model and the surface hydrology is inbuilt into that. So it's easy now to estimate that if you do some past data, we have the reanalysis data, satellite data, that what was the pattern in the past, let's say in the last decade, from the past data, we can estimate. And we can have the projections from the sub-seasonal to seasonal prediction. What are the demand going to be? We have the knowledge of population, cropping pattern, water consumption. So that will give us the idea, using all this end-to-end modeling system, that what's going to be the demand in, let's say, in the next week or a couple of weeks or even up to a season. So we are now in a phase that this technology is available, and this WMO Hydro Sos project is helping integrate all this thing and bringing together the national capability. And it gives us confidence when we interact with people from different regions with different expertise. So the national capability, we are now confident that we can interact with other scientists on the WMO and use it in day-to-day applications. So this as a tool, as a framework, what Michelle said just now, that we have an end-to-end system now, starting from monitoring to prediction, let's say up to a few weeks, short-term climate prediction, and the hydrological tools. We can use that for assessing, at least in the short-term climate, like up to a season, the water demand can be computed. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Ashish. And personally, I welcome your stressing the point that Hydro Sos is a hydrometeorological system. It doesn't work unless we all work together to deliver those end-to-end products. So thank you for stressing that. Let me move on and just think a little bit about Hydro Sos in the context of what many of you are talking about in Glasgow at the moment, which is climate change adaptation, climate change resilience. Is this a tool that can help us address those issues, maybe? Michaela, perhaps you have a view on that?
Thank you, Alan. I have some thoughts that I want to discuss regarding this question. First of all, it's easy to see that there are different situations around the world. For developing countries with economic and social issues, it's more difficult to generate adaptation and resilience. So the consequences of climate change increase the social inequality gap. I think that Hydro Sos will make it possible to strengthen the national meteorological and hydrological services, and mainly the ones that need it the most. Hydro Sos brings them a tool that contributes to improve adaptation and resilience, and I want to highlight two ways that, in my opinion, contribute on that. On one hand, Hydro Sos contribute to improve data availability. That is one of the most common issues. For the output to be useful in Hydro Sos, there needs to be some minimal criteria for the data sets. And I think that work on reach this minimum criteria by improving the data that we have or including global data sets if we have lack of data is very important. And on the other hand, Hydro Sos will build the capabilities of the national meteorological and hydrological services to produce hydrological outlooks, understanding how water resources in the river basin may change over the weeks or the months. So this initiative contributes to build capability in short-term flood forecasting, drought information system, and long-term climate projection. So for the reason I mentioned, I think that Hydro Sos support national agencies enforcing their capabilities, and being part of a platform that brings valuable information make it possible to achieve better solutions in terms of adaptation to climate change. Thank you.
Thank you, Michaela. Very nice comments. And let me pass immediately to Arsene to just ask if he would support the need for that data collection and capacity building, or whether there are other thoughts about how we can help with climate change adaptation and resilience. Arsene.
Yeah, thank you very much. Of course, maybe considering like the context of the Lake Victoria Basin, where I sit here in East Africa. Of course, the lake is shared by 5 countries. And when you look at the size, of course, it's the second largest freshwater body, fed mainly 80% by rainfall. And when you look at the coverage, maybe in terms of hydrological stations within the basin, of course, you find that there's in terms of coverage or in terms of sources of data, there's an issue. But when you look at the population, we are now counting more than, I think, almost 100 million in the basin, with the 5 major cities. If you consider, for instance, one of the sector like infrastructure, there are cities around the lake, about the major ones are 4, and they have to take, for instance, to draw water from the lake for water supply. Now, you need to build, for instance, water resilience infrastructures or climate resilient infrastructures that you don't want tomorrow to be, you know, having intakes hanging, you know. You want to be supplying water, of course, to the population that are mentioned, you know, in a regular manner. So, but when you look now, the kind of tools we have, the kind of information we have, of course, you find there a gap. So I think this kind of tool like Hydro Sos can help actually in monitoring like the water levels, help like bigger regional organizations such as Ipcc to inform countries, bring them together, which of course also reinforces the integration. Maybe another last thing is that when you look at the kind of infrastructure or interventions we have on different issues like water quality, in terms of sanitation, for instance, you find that we do things just no regret measures. And sometimes, of course, they don't help people to recover from, let's say, floods or whatever. So it requires more thinking. It requires more robust tools. And of course, Hydro Sos, I think, is one of the solution. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Arsene, for those helpful thoughts. And so I think we've at least convinced ourselves as panelists that we have a system here which would be very useful, both currently and into the future, to assess climate change adaptation, resilience, and so on. So all we have to do is implement it, and that should be a piece of cake. Although we've just heard actually that this system has to take note of many different environments, many different climates, some places with data, some places without data, many different uses of the water, many different sectors. So the question is, let's see if we can put some flavor on how we develop the future plans for implementing Hydro Sos. And I'd like to turn back to Jose Alberto, because in WMO Region 4, South America, they have the ambition to take forward Hydro Sos. But Jose Alberto, could you just give us some flesh on the bones of the immediate things that we need to do and the medium-term things we need to do to make this a success?
Sure, thanks again. Well, maybe perhaps you know that in Central America, we have a climate forum and a hydrological forum. The climate forum is in place since maybe 15 years ago or so. And we have implemented also a hydrological forum in order to deliver the status and this prediction. But we're missing something. And as Harry mentioned before, and some other of the participants here, we need to strengthen certain levels of the hydrological value chain. And we need to work, let's say, in a bottom-up approach that will give us the strength in order to deliver better predictions. We're starting from the generation of the raw data, let's say, and then build this to have better calibration of the models, better predictions later, and also interacting with the meteorological part. But we need to start with that, and then we will be improving our predictions for sure. So we need to start from the very beginning of the value chain. And that's the focus on this. And of course, we will be identifying some gaps on modeling maybe, or what is required more than, what is some other requirements from the Met services. But this is the approach, bottom up, let's say, and then trying to build a very strong value chain in this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jose Alberto. We get your message. There is a lot to do to implement Hydro SOS, but I think we're all agreed of the value. I would like to give an opportunity for anybody in the audience to ask questions, and anybody online can do so by typing something into the chat box. And somebody here, me, one of the panelists, will try and answer. But I should also hand back to Johannes in Glasgow to see if there are any questions that people have from the attendees who are there in person. So perhaps I can seamlessly hand to Johannes to check if there are any questions.
Yeah, thanks, Alan. It's late evening. Everybody has been busy in the COP. I don't know if we have questions from our audience. I will open the floor in a minute. I'm also monitoring my chat here if we have any questions online. I just maybe want to reflect a little bit in 2 minutes again on what has been said and what we are trying to do here. And before I will open the floor. And I think it has become clear from our panelists today that the Hydro SOS is a tool that we need at the national and local level to really safeguard our services and societies for what is going to come. And we know what's going to come. We know that water resources from ice are non-renewable water resources. We know this stuff will deplete, so we need to really monitor at the moment. We need to start monitoring this process so that we can provide solutions for a future to supply our people with water. We know that even if we stop emitting any type greenhouse gases, the next 50, 60, 70 years, our extreme events will strike harder. We need to provide solutions for that, and those solutions cannot be provided if we don't know what our water cycle is doing. So that's clear, and while we struggle in the COP to find a climate stocktake, we have no clue about water stocktake. We measure distances and chemical compositions on Mars, but we don't know how much water runs down the Congo, and that's really a scandal. We know that the Hydro SOS system, if we would implement it all together, would cost us something like $500 million maybe. And now you say that's a lot of money and who's going to pay for it. But if you think nuclear submarines are en vogue these days, those things cost 2.5 billion a piece. So for just a fifth of a nuclear submarine, we could also have that base information system that our planet needs to adapt to climate change. And I have just calculated while we were talking here, my kids buy a lot of sugary stuff. So it would take them 7 million years to waste so much money on sugary stuff. I have 4 kids, so that's the calculus in there. So my family would take 7 million years in buying Mars bars or so, but we could also just decide on the planet that we just want to implement this system. Now that gives you a little bit dimension of what we're talking about. But I just wanted to reflect this here because I think it's such an important topic, and it's really not such a big deal if you look at what we have done for the COVID or what we can do for other funny purposes. So I don't know if there's anybody in the room who wants to make a comment or who has a question around Hydro SOS. I know that it's late and I will not bother you for much longer. Yeah, can you? We have Abdullah Moxit here, the secretary of the Ipcc.
Thank you very much, Johannes, and thank you for the moderator and also for all the panelists. Yes, I just want to follow what you said, because now the water cycle and the water stocktake is a little bit complicated because it is not only depending of climate change global stocktake, this combination about all this variability. So I think in 6 months, 1 year, we have no control, we have no visibility how the water will be there. And then now what we know is that the acceleration for extreme event is there. And in another word, also that means there are a lot of water coming in short period and concentrated in one place. And also we can have long, period of drought. That means about water resource management, the problem of management is there. And this is what really, important. And this is what is really serious because now cities, for example, the water resources for one cities, big cities, it can be sufficient in one time, but just 1 month after, it can be, in the situation with scarcity of water. That means you should plan for intermittent resources. And this is a new concept now which is coming. How the cities and the small village will start thinking about how to manage intermittence, lack of water, because it is about the life of people, because you cannot, let, people without water for their own health, not only, also for the economies. Many economies are based on water. So I think this is something we should really highlight, that stocktake for water is becoming more and more serious. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Abdallah. Water and climate stocktake, or an integrated water and climate stocktake, is one of the objectives of the Water and Climate Coalition that was launched yesterday by the President of Hungary, President of Tajikistan, and 10 UN agencies here in the COP. So I think we are aware of what we need. I think we also have the solutions. We also have seen on our panel today that around the world we have many people who want to do these things, and now I think we just need to really pull our gear together and help all these people in actually implementing this system and maintaining this system, and this will help the national level, but it will also help the global level, because again, we are measuring greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. That is necessary, but we don't know really about the water cycle on the planet, and the greenhouse gases will heat our planet and will change it, but we need the water to drink. So there's really some real urgency behind this system.
Once again, because now this is exactly what I want to mean, because I am confident, because with WMO, with this alliance, I think you did the good work, and I should really congratulate you. I think we were talking about with children. I think it is same thing. You have 4 children, I have 4 children, but what is really important is we should really work for the children, because when it will be little, in 30 years, 40 years, we will not be responsible, because we are going to be in the other side, but they will face the problem. So I think this is what we should do now. Thank you very much.
Good. Is anybody in the room wanting to make a comment or a question? Yeah, gentleman in the back.
Thank you so much. The technology is quite good, and my concern is in Africa, you realize most, for instance, in agriculture, it's largely dependent on rain, and therefore lack of proper technologies to assist or support in prediction and things like early warning is really failing, and therefore when floods come, people are not prepared for that, and it affects their production. And when drought comes, the same case happens. So you're finding many people in Africa are experiencing hunger because of lack of proper prediction, maybe systems that could have otherwise helped to cushion them early enough so that they know when planting season is about, or when we are experiencing drought, so that probably they can store enough food. So how are you working with probably African governments to support in this process so that you can be able to avert the crisis which is being experienced there?
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, I am Munir Hussain Chaudhary. I am from Bangladesh. You know, Bangladesh is a downstream country, and during the dry season, we suffering dryness. All of our river is drying, but during the wet season, even we don't have any early warning. Our upstream country suddenly discharges water and big flooding. Very recent, there was a big flood there. So these are the things happening for the Bangladesh. Thank you.
Yeah, I have. I know how this situation is, and it is a very difficult situation, and I think there are, of course, different drivers for these things. In Africa, we had the example of the rain-fed hydrological impact, and what you are alluding to is partially also a managed problem that we are facing. I think in both continents we have some pilot activities ongoing on the Hydro Sos, on the hydrological status and outlook system around Lake Victoria that we are trying to scale up now, and we will just have later this month a kickoff meeting with countries around the Ganges, Brahmaputra, Meghna River Basin, also including the ministerial level to bring those countries together and to create a system that they can evaluate together. And I know this will not resolve the issues within 6 months or a year. We all know, if we deal with water management, how tedious and difficult it is for us to trust each other. But I think in the end, this is also one of the big aspirations that we have with this system, to create a bit more transparency and trust, and just this feeling that we're not working against each other, but with each other. So if you are interested, please contact me after the event and we can stay in touch. So I think we need to close this event. We are running over time now, and we woke up a bit late, but I think it's always encouraging to see that people stay until the end and that they have something to say. So thank you very much for that. Thanks to all the panelists who were online. Thank you, Harry. Thank you, Alan, for an excellent preparation and moderation of this event. And I'd now ask Alan, do you want to say a few famous last words before we let everybody go have dinner here in Glasgow?
Well, no, I don't have any words other than thank you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for participating, particularly the panelists who are in different times of the day around the globe. Many, many thanks. And for those of you on the ground in Glasgow, I would say cheers. Enjoy your dinner, and raise a glass for us who can't be there with you. Thank you all.
Thanks and cheers.